Chair recognizes Senator the Honourable Fred Mitchell.
In terms of these, you need to start over? Okay, yeah, well, here I am again. Nice to see you all out there. Is the mic on now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Earlier I was told by our colleague, so is the time start again? I want my 30 seconds back, as Maxine Waters says, reclaiming my time. Yes. As I was saying, this was a piece of legislation that ordinarily would have been done on the nod, because as the learned Attorney General said, the matter is entirely technical, all about international treaties and all this stuff about financial services and what we're doing to protect the financial services sector. But I thought in our internal caucus, as we were talking about this, that this was an opportunity also to amplify, apropos what the senator just before had said about us being supplicants to the world, and talked about the ethics of the jurisdiction being transparent and that we must be above board, and all of this is good for the sector. But I have always, in connection with the financial services sector, raised the point about the ethics of these developed countries and their conduct towards smaller countries. And there is something off about their ethics, because what they have done in doing all of these things, and we are fighting to keep jobs and all the rest of it, is they have essentially gone back on the creed of free trade, which was something they were touting 10, 15 years ago. Remember that? And that's how there's this herd instinct around the world, where you run off in one direction to get about something, and then the international community suddenly changes its mind and says, we're going in another direction, and they don't check for us or anything. I mean, we see, for example, what happened with the relations between the United States and our neighbor, Cuba. And I kept telling people, they're our neighbor. We have a responsibility to have relations with them, and so it is important for us to have a good relationship with our closest neighbor. And when the United States decides that they're going to change, they're not going to ask us a thing. They're just going to change. And if you suffer, too bad. That's how it goes. And they're the big players in the field. And so we now face what we face with the European Union and the United States. So the ethical issue is this. Having decided that they are no longer interested in free trade, that they're going to put up all these barriers to trade, because one of the aspects of free trade was tax competition. You have no tax, that means you could compete with a society that has 10% or 30% tax. Now all of that is out the window, and they say everybody must have tax, because the next thing that is coming down the road, and you saw one of the advocates for the sector saying this just last week, that the only thing that's really going to cure this problem is the imposition of some kind of corporate income tax in order to get these people to back off where they're headed. So sometime down the road, somebody's going to come calling with that. So the goalposts keep shifting. But what concerns me really is the sort of practical effect that all of this has had on us in this sense. Bank accounts are being shut down without explanation in the country. There was a whole raft of reports in the Tribune this week, I believe, of people who live here who say, look, I've been with the Royal Bank of Canada all of these years, and suddenly I can't access my account because they sent some document to me, they claim 2 months ago, and it was supposed to be KYC information. I didn't get it, and because the deadline passed, Suddenly I can't access my bank accounts, and worse, I can't get my money out of the bank. And that has happened all because of these strictures that were imposed piece by piece, piecemeal, since the year 2000. And it's just gotten worse. It is a total and virtual nightmare if you are any one of us to open a bank account anywhere, because they've created this nonsense about politically exposed persons. And once you're one of those, you, your wife, your family can't get anything done in a bank. It's ridiculous. The first I heard of it was the foreign minister of Panama was talking to me, complaining that his bank account in Nassau had been shut down preemptorily. And I said, what? Yeah, because I'm the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Panama and a politically exposed person. And it took him months to get it reversed. The foreign minister of the UK told me that it's not only here, but the daughter of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, 12 years old, couldn't open a bank account in the UK because she was her father's daughter. I mean, this is utter rubbish. Yes, sir, in the UK. I'm using various jurisdictions. There's not just a problem. But I say we've hemmed ourselves into this nonsense that we can't seem to escape. And then the sort of double whammy is you now say that the banks must be transparent. So we bend over backwards to pass all these laws and to change all the things to make sure we're transparent and all the rest of it, to meet the strictures that you set. Then when you set them, your banking sector then says, we're not going to cash your checks overseas because you don't, not because you don't meet the standard, you passed all the laws and all the rest of it, but they say the risk is too high. And then when you go to the governments to complain about it, they say, well, that's not a government issue. That's a business decision being made by the banks. So pretty soon, if we don't address this issue, and this is what why I look to the point of the speaker before me, is that at some point you want to say, when do you actually stand up and say, enough of this rubbish? Enough of it. The problem is we don't have the leverage and we haven't found an opening, so we keep, going back and going back. So I hope, that in doing this, that this helps to protect the sector. Let me say that, Madam President, that the Progressive Liberal Party did everything which was required to make sure that we are here today. In the sense, not in the sense of the timing, but in the sense of everything which the sector said was required, everything that our international, and I love this expression, partners say that they want, we've done. But it's a very heavy-handed one-way partnership, I can tell you, because this is like a gun to your head. You can't say no. Otherwise, you're in a jam. But we did everything. If the sector came to us and said, "Do X," we did it. Simple as that. No issue. Now, the Attorney General mentioned speed as one of his criteria. Let's look at speed. First, the sector came to us and said, "We want the bilateral approach." That's what they said. We said, fine, no problem with us. We go with that. Then, sometime during this year, I think you said there was a meeting in April. I remembered it February, March, there were meetings. A man comes a-calling from the OECD who is in charge of this issue and says, look, you're not going to be able to get all these things signed. We don't see that as practical. And so you're not going to make it on this list, the next list we have, which came out 2 days ago. So we knew, the PLP knew that we wouldn't be on that list. But if you don't switch to the multilateral or get these others signed, you will be on the next list. So backpedal, backstroke, we now change to multilateral. And that decision was a commitment made by the government with the sector before we lost office. And we lost office in May. The Attorney General says the meeting took place in April. So April comes. I see from the timeline here that in June you made the formal commitment. Okay, so the formal commitment is made. Then, so we could have passed the legislation in June. The Parliament met, but it went on vacation for 13 weeks and came back and did nothing. So, all right, vacation done. We're now in November, and we're at the point where it needs to be signed. So what I'm saying is, the only point I'm making is why you want to join issue. Yesterday, you called the House of Assembly together, right? Everybody's calm and collected. The Minister for Financial Services is either the mover or the seconder. The Minister of Finance is either the mover or seconder. They mention nothing about the PLP having a problem with this, and so on and so forth, right? So while we are all glad-handing one another in the House and saying nice things to one another, right, out comes this press release, which is an absolute stab in the back. Says, you fellas are the fault. That's the reason. And then we're being asked this morning to come here and be nice and kind to the Attorney General, which we are happy to do, because it's the country that counts. All you have to do is say patriotism. All you have to say is Commonwealth of the Bahamas, we stand with you. There's no difference. So why you want to get mixed up in this? Why? Why? You. I'm talking about the collective you. Why do you want to do that? You know, as Bahamians say, yuck up my vexation this morning, man. And you know my cousin Gwen is Anna Martin. She doesn't hold her mouth back, right? So the first I heard of it was she posted something on her page this morning saying, what sort of thing is this? You know, the same points I made here today. You come and ask us, and we agree. And then you tell us it's our fault. And I'm saying the minister, the director, sorry, the minister, the previous minister of Attorney General, Alison Gibson, Hope Strachan, went and saw the gentleman, Pascal, I believe is his name. Right. He actually came here to the Bahamas, so there was no issue. He told us all the other countries had signed, so we were a bit isolated and we needed to change fast, so we did that. And as I said, the election came in between, right? And, you know, I'm sorry, but you try to be charitable, right? But here's a man who's attacking us now, right? Attacking us, the Honourable Prime Minister. But, yes, he did. Yes, he did. Merciless. Say it's our fault. It's our fault. And so we are bound to defend it, you know? And the point is this. We could have made much more over something that was gazetted, actually gazetted. A whole half of a portfolio was transferred from one minister to the next, and he couldn't remember that it was done. He couldn't remember, the Prime Minister, who's responsible for allocation of portfolios.
Madam President.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honourable Carl Bethel. I see
I see the member opposite is on his man point, but and we certainly wanted to keep the spirit of the debate in here at the appropriate level for the Senate. But condescending to where he's gone, I have to take a stand and say that the record on this is clear. The intention that of the Prime Minister was to restore the best commission and the best commission only to its proper place where it had originally been for years, which was under the portfolio of the Office of the Prime Minister. And that is because of the very close tie-in between the best commission and Bahamas Investment Authority, particularly with any investments, and it was designed to be this way, that could have an environmental impact. An error was made in the Cabinet Office in complying with those instructions, and that document somehow made it into the public sphere before he had even seen it. Had he seen it, he would immediately have known that this was an error as an official document. But it was presented to him as a document floating around on the web, which he dismissed as fake news. The fact is, though, had that been presented to him as it ought to have been, as a physical document, Prime Minister, here is what you've ordered. Just confirm that this is what you've ordered before we gazette it, which is what ought to have happened. He would then have said, no. All I want is best commission, or to be transferred. So take all of that other stuff out and leave that with Minister Ferreira. That is what happened. So he was merely responding off the cuff to what appeared to have been something that he knew. He never gave no order for that to happen. So let's not make a mountain out of a mistake, eh? Thank you.
That's
Hold on, Senator.
By the officials, not by the Prime Minister.
Okay, we've heard Senator Bethel's explanation. I've listened to your comment as well, Senator. But let's get back to the International Tax Corporation, and let's stick with that, please.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be at it this afternoon with this back and forth.
Yeah, no, I understand, but, as I said, when we agreed to this consent, I said this was a matter which should be fully aired and amplified. The point is this, that I'm glad for the fulsome explanation and all the rest of it, right? But he knows what error on the face of the record is, right? And the record is what stands. So you can explain and say all that other thing, the record is what stands. What I'm saying, though, it is the
Senators,
record. It's the record. It's
Yeah,
the
but-
record. It's the record. Now,
Senator Bethel, come on.
the other point is the issue of what our values are, and I'm getting back to this ethical point about this, right? There are reasons why we have the kind of country we have. I think that the creation of this sector probably dates back to the Second World War, when the rich Brits were fleeing the Second World War and came here and used this jurisdiction to keep their wealth, right? So that's where it started, and it has moved on from there. Now, there are two things which still abide, and one says that, this country's always used the legal loopholes in the greater societies in order to succeed in its economy. That's always been, whether it's the egregious case of rum running and drugs and all the rest of it, that's how money has often come into the Bahamas. But there are two legitimate things I think that we ought to continue to think about. One is that people come here because it is a place which has less regulation than where they live. That's the whole idea of coming here, because it's more comfortable with less regulation. Often, some people have said, when they heard me say, I don't want to move to the United States, because, gosh, man, the number of rules you got to it just drives you completely nuts. You can't do this, you can't do the next thing, so on and so forth. So people like living in a society which is relatively regulation-free. Number two, there are also good reasons for privacy. Good reasons for privacy. And the example I often use is during the time when the Italians were having a huge problem with the Red Brigade, which was a terrorist group, I believe, in the 70s. And I remember reading a commentary during that time, and they said that rich people in Italy would actually dress down because they didn't want to be identified as rich because it was a security problem. If you were identified as, in fact, it still exists in Mexico City today. People who are wealthy have to have bodyguards everywhere they go. And some people even said, at some point it was getting that bad in Trinidad, right, and Tobago. So there are reasons for your own personal security why you don't want people to know that you have plenty of money. You want your wealth to be private. So that's one, your own security. Two, the other reason is, if you have wealth, you have seen, Cyprus being the most recent example, that a government can wake up one day, you have all your millions or billions or whatever it is in the bank, and they decide you ain't got nothing because they've taken it. It's all gone, vanished overnight. So every prudent person who has wealth spreads his risk around the world. Some in England, some in Nassau, some in Bermuda, some in the United States, so that he protects against the confiscation or loss of his wealth by things that are not under his control. And that's the service which jurisdictions like the Commonwealth of the Bahamas provide. And it seems to me there are still, therefore, good reasons for that. So we will meet these latest standards, no issue. But people are trying to make, these people who are designing these policies are trying to make us feel as if we're doing something unethical or immoral or crooked or something because we're involved in this, right? And meanwhile, Their own societies are using it. States in the United States, some of the jurisdictions of the United Kingdom. And you will remember the example of the British Prime Minister, okay, previous to this one, who had, yes, David Cameron, who had his father made an investment in one of these financial services vehicles in the Bahamas. And it was subsequent, when it came to fall to him, he subsequently sold the interest and repatriated the interest to the UK. And I said to my colleagues, that's the perfect thing that we were telling him, because everything we know about the financial services sector is this. They say that this money steals from their taxpayers. But you know, if you're home in the United States, you might have your money somewhere else, but you still like to live in Rhode Island. You just have your money over here. And one day, the money's going to come right back home. It ain't not going to go anywhere. So what these offshore centers do is they help in capital accumulation, both for financing projects overseas and also ultimately for increasing the wealth of the people who are in their home countries. And the record is the money goes right back to them. And the David Cameron example was a perfect example of what happened. Cashed it in, took it back to England. So there was no net loss to the UK at all. And that's the thing that we keep saying. No, there's nothing. But in the meantime, what has it done? It has helped these small, marginal societies survive. That's what it's done. And every time, the ethical and moral problem we have is that you're telling us that you have greater and better morality than we do because you are enforcing your tax laws. In the meantime, people in the Caribbean are starving, can't feed their children, can't educate their children, having to take the boats to go to other countries. And you don't think that there's anything morally or unethically wrong by your forcing that result on our societies. Why is half of Jamaica now in the United States and across the world? Why are 58% of our kids not coming home after their university education? Why? Because you can't. The opportunities we try to provide, every time you try to provide some opportunity, it's being hemmed in, it's being blocked, it's being changed, and then you want to preach morality at us. I mean, there's something just fundamentally wrong with this. But you know, you're the boss, and we grew up in, you know, saying yes, boss, so we know how to say yes, boss, you know. But, you know, as I say to someone, don't think for a minute that I mean it. Don't think for a minute. Don't get fooled. Don't get fooled. Just know what the truth is. Yes, boss means simply that. Yes, boss. Whatever you say. As the lady told me when I was working at ZNS, use your power, man. Do whatever you want to do, right? But when these societies, when our kids are all back in these societies, I mean, I mentioned this just tangentially, talking to a family in Salt Pond, Long Island. They had 3 brilliant kids, 2 of them 4.0 students. And they were just talking to me, not our supporters. I just happened to be down on Long Island. They said, look, you know, thing that concerns us is we had 2 kids, 4.0. They go off to Canada to school, they get their degree, none of them come back. And we have all these businesses here in Long Island that we're developing and leaving for them. They have a 3rd kid who's a 3.9 student right now. He's obviously going off to university. And their worry is he going to come back and help build Long Island? And when you look at Long Island, tremendous vistas, just a beautiful place, and dying on the vine, and particularly the south of the island. You know, what, and they keep saying, what are we going to do? So all of us, all governments, are trying desperately to find a niche, that niche which will allow us to keep our kids here and occupy these rocks and keys. And it's in the security interests of these larger countries to do so. If the rocks and keys are bereft and vacant, you know, you're gonna have security problems. The Anglican bishop 2 away, Michael Eldon, used to always say that. You know, he says, look, the very same things that attract the tourists also attract the drug smugglers. the remoteness, the quietness, the so on and so forth. And I got to say this, right? You can't, they're going to come with more and more and more. And I said there's got to be a point where we say, look, this far, no, we're going no farther. But, I got to say, man, to get up and say, as a public official of an international banking operation, that Ragged Island makes no sense to rebuild Ragged Island. No, published in the newspaper 2-3 days ago. Yeah, from the IDB. Why would you say that? Why would you say that? Does it make sense to rebuild Key West? Same thing. Hurricane hit Key West, wrecked the place. The people started rebuilding. Ragged Island is a home to people. It's got a tradition, right? They want to rebuild. It's a free country, and if the island is left vacant and nobody's there, who you think going to move there? Exactly. Or worse than that, not just foreigners, but guys with guns and drugs and so on and so forth. So it's got to be occupied. There are sound, compelling reasons why Ragged Island has to be rebuilt. So those are our issues with this. I want to say again, Madam President, that we are increasingly alarmed at what's happening with the local domestic banking sector, to the point where our own party has now got an internal committee looking at what policies we can generate with regard to this, because the Bahamian banks may have to expand, the credit unions may have to get up, but it's a huge problem. And again, if you're truly interested in a bipartisan approach on this, this is something which we should join together to look at, because it's just becoming increasingly complicated to do. You talk about ease of business. Try opening a bank account. Just try opening a bank account. One of the things that was compelling in this latest event that was exposed in the newspaper was the person said, I've been banking with the Royal Bank of Canada for 40 years. And they're asking me to produce information about who I am. What are they talking about? They've known me for 40 years. But that's the point at which we got. So the other day, lady, I hadn't been to bank 10, 15 years. And it's like going to the dentist for me. I don't want to go in no bank, right? Don't want to see them. But so I have to go in there because they refuse to, something they said they wouldn't issue to me unless I make a personal appearance. Why in the name of heaven I got to make a personal appearance in a bank, I have no idea, but I go in, right? Well, but there are all kinds of checks and balances to do that. But that's where we are. So we support this bill. But please tell the leader of your party, man, ease up. Ease up. We will work together with the government in this matter for the betterment of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and that's why we support the legislation. So thanks a lot for the intervention.
Thank you. As many